The landscape of horror cinema contains numerous iconic figures that have embedded themselves into cultural consciousness, yet few possess the psychological penetration of the scarred dream hunter who transforms sleep into a hunting ground. This analysis dissects the intricate mythology surrounding this entity, examining how straightforward terror evolves into sophisticated psychological warfare through exploration of rejection, vengeance, and the fundamental defenselessness inherent in the sleeping state. The mythological framework originates in Springwood, Ohio, anchored by a birth contaminated with violation and disgrace. At the narrative's foundation lies Amanda, a woman whose history contained trauma beyond articulation. Confined within psychiatric walls and deemed mentally unfit, she endured savage brutality from multiple assailants' violence that produced unwanted pregnancy. This foundation of horror establishes the central figure's existence as accidental consequence rather than intended creation, a life marked for rejection before awareness even developed. The infant emerging from such circumstances entered an environment already conditioned to revile him. The conditions of his conception branded him before language acquisition, establishing a pattern of isolation and maltreatment that would prove self-perpetuating. This origin point introduces critical thematic material. The antagonist wasn't inherently malevolent, but manufactured through deliberate abandonment and institutional collapse. The mythology poses challenging questions regarding communal culpability and the ramifications of collectively ignoring suffering we find uncomfortable or inconvenient to acknowledge. Throughout his formative years in Springwood, the boy encountered unrelenting ostracism from every quarter. Peers labeled him contaminated and maintained fearful separation. Authority figures, educators, community members, anyone positioned to intervene selected willful ignorance over engagement. This comprehensive failure engineered conditions where brutality thrived without consequence, where a defenseless child absorbed the lesson that existence offered nothing except antagonism and anguish. Darkness became his sole refuge, quietude his only solace. This developmental period within the mythology examines society's role in breeding its own terrors through apathy. Harassment proceeded unchallenged. Misery remained invisible to those bearing responsibility for protection. The youth learned concealment of suffering, suppression of fury and dread. Yet these emotions persisted, they compounded, generating pressure destined for catastrophic release. The narrative proposes that malevolence frequently originates not from innate corruption, but from total absence of affection and guidance during critical developmental windows. The decisive transformation arrives with merciless finality. Amanda's execution, conflagration consuming not merely a human being, but the final remnant of the boy's capacity for compassion. Observing this atrocity, witnessing flames annihilate his mother, the child who possessed potential for redemption vanished completely. Something fundamentally different emerged from that blaze, something constructed from trauma and propelled by wrath. This metamorphosis represents the irreversible threshold, where accumulated anguish and desertion crystallize into something supernatural and menacing. The fire operates across multiple symbolic dimensions. It embodies simultaneous purification and obliteration, the combustion of human fragility and its substitution with something more resilient and perilous. The mythology indicates this transcended mere psychological alteration but achieved metaphysical transformation. The trauma proved so extreme, it warped reality itself, generating something capable of exceeding normal physical constraints. Beyond this juncture, the narrative transitions from tragedy toward horror, from sympathetic origins toward predatory menace. Following metamorphosis, the figure discovers capacity to penetrate and control dreams, converting the universal human experience of slumber into stalking grounds. This framework exploits fundamental anxieties. Humans spend approximately 1/3 of existence unconscious and exposed, incapable of governing what minds generate during rest. The mythology weaponizes this exposure, proposing that the refuge where we seek restoration might instead become an arena where we're pursued by something comprehending our profoundest terrors. The dream dimension provides ideal hunting territory for this being. Within this space, physical principles dissolve, fear achieves tangible form, and the predator maintains absolute superiority over disoriented targets. Victims cannot differentiate dream from actuality, cannot achieve escape through awakening, cannot mount defense using conventional armaments. The mythology engineers a situation of complete powerlessness, where the simple act of closing eyes becomes potentially lethal. This perverts the typical security of sleep, transforming recuperation into hazard. Fundamental to the mythology stands the distinctive bladed glove, an implement representing the conversion of torment into offensive apparatus. Each blade doesn't simply lacerate tissue, but penetrates the essence, delivering damage transcending the corporeal. The weapon incarnates the character's worldview. Dread itself constitutes the authentic killer. Physical injury, merely manifestation of psychological devastation. The greater victim's terror, the more powerful their tormentor grows, establishing a reinforcing cycle where horror amplifies horror. This comprehension of fear as sustenance exhibits sophisticated psychological understanding. The mythology avoids presenting simple predator eliminates prey scenarios, but instead investigates how terror operates, how it nourishes itself, how it can literally empower its origin. Victims aren't selected arbitrarily, but chosen for their capacity for terror, for psychological susceptibilities available for exploitation. The entity deciphers thoughts, predicts reactions, constructs customized nightmare scenarios calibrated for maximum psychological devastation. The hunting techniques described within the mythology reveal calculated patience rather than chaotic violence. The entity manipulates victims, prolonging terror, relishing fear before administering death. This sadism fulfills dual objectives, maximizing suffering while strengthening the predator through accumulated dread. Temporal perception distorts within dream space moments, expand into eternities of terror. Death approaches with excruciating gradualism. Victims experience protracted psychological torture, preceding inevitable termination. Community response mirrors realistic patterns of rejection and alarm. Some pursue rationalization, searching for logical explanations, addressing inexplicable fatalities. Others resort to frantic measures, archaic ceremonies, protective talismans, anything offering prospect against supernatural danger. Yet nothing demonstrates efficacy against an adversary existing primarily within consciousness rather than physical dimension. The mythology constructs a scenario of absolute helplessness, where every defense collapses and hope itself transforms into hazardous illusion. What renders this mythology particularly potent is its investigation of trauma's propagation across generations. The entity manufactured through abandonment and violence now delivers identical experiences to others, maintaining cycles of affliction. Parents who potentially participated in original abandonment now observe their offspring suffering repercussions. The mythology suggests that cruelty generates consequences that endure, that societal deficiencies eventually return to plague those who averted their gaze. Survivors emerge psychologically demolished, permanently altered by experiences that obscure boundaries between rationality and insanity. The trauma they sustain exceeds conventional post-traumatic stress. They've confronted something that shouldn't manifest, survived impossible circumstances, witnessed reality's plasticity. These survivors bear invisible wounds, recollections of conflicts appearing unreal yet producing concrete damage. Their continuing suffering demonstrates that survival doesn't equal triumph, that enduring such encounters permanently modifies one's relationship with reality itself. The mythology's sophistication derives from refusing straightforward characterization. The entity simultaneously manifests as casualty and perpetrator, tragic figure and ruthless executioner. This duality creates uncomfortable complexity. How do we evaluate a monster produced entirely through human brutality? The original child merited protection and received exclusively abandonment. The resulting entity warrants destruction, yet stems from comprehensible causation. This ambiguity compels engagement with difficult questions regarding accountability, salvation, and whether certain damage proves beyond repair. Some interpretations emphasize her tragic components: a life obliterated before commencement, potential extinguished through systematic failure. Others concentrate on monstrous present, contending that origin doesn't validate ongoing brutality. This tension renders the character captivating beyond simple frights. He embodies the consequences we'd prefer avoiding acknowledgement of, the cost of societal negligence, the monsters we manufacture through collective indifference. Comprehending this doesn't signify excusing, but rather recognizing uncomfortable verities about causation and effect. As mythology advances, divisions between dream and consciousness erode. Victims no longer trust perceptions, cannot ascertain consciousness state, exist in perpetual suspension between worlds. This disorientation serves the predator flawlessly. Confusion multiplies vulnerability. The entity's presence contorts reality itself. His influence so concentrated, it permeates from unconscious into conscious experience. Springwood becomes nightmare topography, where natural principles increasingly fail, where the impossible becomes commonplace. This blurring generates sustained paranoia within both narrative and audience. If victims cannot trust their faculties, neither can observers. The mythology exploits fundamental uncertainty regarding consciousness. How do we conclusively verify we're awake? What if dreams could genuinely harm us? These questions access philosophical territory while sustaining visceral horror. The outcome is stratified terror operating across both immediate and existential levels simultaneously. Combating this entity demands confronting internal adversaries as much as external dangers. The mythology frames survival as psychological combat. Victims must face their own terrors, culpabilities, and inadequacies that fuel their tormentor. This internalization transforms monster confrontations into personal odysseys. Victory, when achievable, originates not from superior strength, but from inner fortitude, from accepting anguish rather than evading it, from courage existing despite rather than without fear. This structure elevates the mythology beyond simple monster narratives. The authentic adversary isn't the scarred figure wielding blades, but the fear residing within everyone. The entity simply manifests and weaponizes emotions we harbor constantly. Vanquishing him means vanquishing ourselves, or minimally our worst dimensions. Few accomplish this, rendering each victory significant while emphasizing how profound the challenge genuinely is. The mythology proposes that confronting what terrifies us represents the exclusive path to liberation from it. The enduring influence of this mythology derives from its symbolic density. Beyond surface horror, it addresses legitimate concerns regarding vulnerability, retribution, societal collapse, and fear's dominion over human consciousness. The character represents what transpires when we disregard suffering, when communities fail their most vulnerable constituents, when trauma proceeds unaddressed across generations. He's a dark reflection mirroring collective failures and their unavoidable consequences. Contemporary audiences continue discovering relevance within these themes. Modern discourse about childhood trauma, mental wellness, societal responsibility, and violence cycles all connect to elements present within this mythology. The character transcends simple monster designation to become cultural emblem for multiple anxieties about sleep, security, consequences, the darkness potentially residing in anyone pushed beyond limits. His universality ensures continued resonance across different epochs and contexts. The mythology ultimately presents fear as an ineradicable component of human existence. The entity exists because we fear, and while fear persists, so shall he. This creates a scenario without genuine resolution. Individual triumphs might occur, but the underlying danger endures. Each generation confronts identical nightmare. Each must locate courage to resist. Each pays the price for battles their predecessors may have initiated. The cycle continues indefinitely, powered by unchanging human nature. Yet within this darkness, the mythology offers fragile optimism. Each person resisting fear, maintaining courage despite terror, diminishes the shadow's influence. Collective strength might not eliminate the threat, but can contain it, reduce suffering, protect others. The authentic battle isn't against external monster, but internal weakness. Victory signifies not eliminating fear, but refusing to permit it control us, selecting courage despite justified terror. This message transforms horror into motivation, suggesting human resilience might ultimately prevail over human darkness. This elaborate mythology demonstrates horror's capacity for investigating serious themes through fantastic frameworks. Whether interpreted as pure fiction, psychological metaphor, or something more sinister, the story resonates because it addresses genuine human concerns. For mature audiences capable of engaging with complex themes, it offers substantial material for contemplation about responsibility, consequences, trauma, and fear's role in human experience. The scarred dreamstalker persists not despite his disturbing nature, but because of it. He represents our shadow selves, our capacity for creating monsters through neglect, our vulnerability during unconsciousness, our struggle with fear that never completely disappears. The mythology's power lies in forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, while warning us that the monsters we create often return to haunt us. In recognizing this, perhaps we can break cycles of trauma and abandonment, preventing new nightmares from being born. The darkness waits, but awareness offers hope that together we might finally bring truth to light and prevent the forging of fresh terrors in the fires of our own making.